We will stand up again. We will march again. We will preach again. We will organize again. We are black. We are white. We are Latino. We are Native American. We are Democrat. We are Republican. We are independent. We are people of faith. We are people not of faith. We are natives and immigrants. We are business leaders and workers and unemployed. We are doctors and the uninsured. We are gay. We are straight. We are students. We are parents. We are retirees. We are North Carolina, and we're here, and we ain't going nowhere.
The unanimous Confederate white South is a cherished myth. If someone had tried to put up a Confederate monument here shortly after the Civil War, there would have been another Civil War. Instead, white North Carolinians erected nearly all of our Confederate monuments around 1910, 50 years after the Civil War. After the white supremacy campaign had seized power by force and taken the vote away from black North Carolinians. The monuments reflected that moment of white ascendancy as much as they did the Confederacy. For example, take the Confederate monument over at UNC Chapel Hill, the one more commonly known as Silent Sam. At its dedication in 1913, industrialist Julian Carr bragged in his speech that he had, quote, horsewhipped a Negro wench until her skirts hung in shreds because she publicly insulted a Southern lady, unquote. He heralded what he called the Anglo-Saxon race in the South reunited with itself, with white supremacy as the glue. During the Civil War, the actual Confederacy bitterly divided North Carolinians. This was the last Southern state to secede. There remained a persistent outcry of moral dissent. Thousands of whites even took up arms against the Confederacy, and far more refused to accept its authority. Thousands of black North Carolinians escaped slavery and served in the Union armies. Confederate officials complained that North Carolina was infested with disloyal persons. Confederate Governor Zebulon Vance called the conflict a rich man's war and a poor man's fight, and persistently threatened to take North Carolina out of the Confederacy.
All right, now.
The 1862 Confederate Conscription Act, which exempted prosperous slaveholders from military service, turned many more against the war. Beginning that fall, North Carolina's own internal civil war began in earnest. From the coastal swamps to the wilderness of the Blue Ridge, anti-Confederate guerrillas, Unionists, and runaway slaves battled the Confederacy. Parts of North Carolina became ungovernable. Scores of meetings were held in over 40 of the state's 86 counties to demand an end to the war. Campaigning for re-election in 1864, the Confederate governor, Governor Vance, I believe that's him over there, Governor Vance declared, "The great popular heart is not now and never has been in this war." The notion that the Confederacy represents white North Carolina's heritage is not historical, but instead political. There are roughly 100 Confederate monuments in North Carolina. 5 of them are on the Capitol grounds where we are. There are no monuments to the enslaved that built our state. There are none for the interracial Reconstruction government of the late 1860s, in which black and white came together to write the Constitution we still try to live under, and also built our first system of free, tax-supported public schools until they were overthrown amid a ruthless campaign of Ku Klux Klan violence. Our State House displays no statues to celebrate the interracial fusion movement of the 1890s, the most daring experiment in interracial democracy in Southern political history, which could have led us into a different South. No monuments stand on our courthouse lawns to the interracial civil rights movement. there are no statues of Abraham Galloway, Charlotte Hawkins Brown, Ella Baker, or Julius Chambers. Only one side of our racial history gets a public monument in North Carolina: the Confederates and the white supremacy movement at the turn of the 20th century. And yet the history that we leave out of our public square speaks lessons far more relevant than the Confederacy. It's high time to build the Freedom Monument Park, long planned but never funded. The new mandatory Confederate Monument Act denies communities the right to decide how they will mark their own local history. In truth, this law is not about history so much as it is about current power arrangements. The extremists are trying to cement their power in place, like the ridiculous law cements the monuments in place. But I warn them now, not even Art Pope can buy cement that strong. This legislation is not about preserving the history of the Civil War. Instead, it will be remembered as a monument to racial gerrymandering, racially driven voting laws, a war on the public schools, and to its authors' quaking fear of a different kind of North Carolina, where the weak grow strong and everyone has an equal and generous chance to blossom with their own God-given rights and abilities. Thank you.